Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a discussion about the confident connection of executive presence with Rich Bracken and Crystal Morrow. I'm Amy Goldstein, chair of the training programs for the Legal Mentor Network, and I also own Grayson Allen, a recruiting and coaching firm for attorneys. If you're not familiar with the Legal Mentor Network, it is a nonprofit organization that provides free mentoring services to law students and junior attorneys. We welcome mentors and mentees. You can find out more about the organization and also sign up at our website, legalmentornetwork.org. If you have questions this afternoon, feel free to put them in the Q&A as we go along. If Rich and Crystal can get to them in a timely way, they'll incorporate it into the conversation. Otherwise, we are leaving time at the end to address any outstanding questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Crystal so she and Rich can introduce themselves. Thanks so much to you both.
Thanks so much, Amy. My name is Crystal Morrow. I'm the executive director of Legal Mentor Network and one of the co-founders. I am currently in-house at IBM as senior counsel in their global markets group. And I am so excited to be listening and speaking with Rich today. So Rich, why don't you say hello to everyone, and thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for spending your time with us today. I'm excited to share the benefits and some of the different background elements of what executive presence is and how it can help you in your career from a communication, personal brand standpoint. But I'm really, really excited to be here, and thank you to Amy and Crystal for having me here today. All right, should we roll right into it?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Okay, let's go. Let's go. It's Thursday. We got to get going. So let's make it happen.
We have a great group.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get started.
Excellent. Well, and again, as Amy said, and Crystal and I will talk with some of these questions that are coming in. If you have any questions along the lines with these different topics that I'm going to share, please feel free to drop them in the chat. If any questions don't get addressed during today's session, I will be putting a video together to answer those questions that come in. But no dumb questions here. All questions are welcome. There's a lot of different content in here that we're going to talk about and ways that you can maximize executive presence in your everyday work life, but also some of the things that you can leverage on your personal side as well. So I'm proud today to be presenting the confident connection of executive presence. Now, when we think about executive presence, a lot of times these words get thrown around in the marketplace where we don't really know what those things are. So when we think about executive presence, it's really that self-communication, that self-confidence, that gravitas that you have when you come into a conversation, when you open a team meeting, when you're communicating with colleagues or clients or whomever you're speaking with. It's that kind of that unsaid thing. So when you could probably think of somebody that you've worked with, and when they walk in the room, the mood lifts, or there's a different confidence level, or they just are really the person you want to be around. That is what executive presence is. The people that are great two-way communicators, ones that when they say something, it actually has some sort of an impact. So that's what we're going to create today for you. And no matter where you are in this journey, because there will be days that you feel incredibly confident and incredibly on the ball. And then there will be those days where you're like, I'm not sure. That imposter syndrome is a real thing. It will creep up on you. But the things I'm going to share today are ways and different methodologies and different beliefs within executive presence, and then practices you can put into play to make sure that you're bringing your best self every single day to work. So I want to talk about a few different elements of what executive presence is. And first and foremost, and it starts here with everything that follows after this, it has to start with your self-belief. Now, this is these are things that I'm going to talk about today that they seem silly, right? Self-belief, like we should be believing in ourselves, but when we have 60,000 thoughts a day and upwards of 75% of them are either neutral or negative, we have a problem with self-belief. And especially in the legal industry, we are taught to be perfectionists. We're taught to not make mistakes. We're taught to be absolutely bulletproof every single day to make sure that we're conveying the right information, that we're leading with authority, that we're deciding things that are in the best interest of our companies, and that everything that we do and say is absolutely perfect. Well, the thing that I'm going to share with you today, and it's going to be a hard pill to swallow for some people, and it was for me when I started digging into this, is that nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect. Now, we all know somebody who thinks they are, and we need to share that news with them too. But when we think about self-belief, there are a lot of different elements of self-belief that play into how you can be a stronger executive. So again, you're not perfect. You need to scrap that mentality of perfection and understand that you are human, that you're going to make mistakes, or what I call opportunities. And within those opportunities, you can grow as a leader. So especially when it comes to making your presence known within different meetings, different scenarios, because I've spoken with attorneys and executives and GCs of some of the largest companies in the world. And some of the conversations come back to the idea of, I don't feel like when I'm in a meeting with the C-suite or with business leaders or with salespeople that they take me seriously or that they want to listen to what I have to say. It's like, oh, it's legal again. Well, we have to make sure that you're bringing in the right amount of confidence. But everything that you say, everything that comes out of your mouth in any meeting, any conversation is your perspective, is your experience. Now, yes, there is law and there are precedents that come about with those. So there will be elements of your communication that will be important to be, obviously stay in line with that. But when it comes to advising or consulting or giving options, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can be more persuasive in conversation too. Everything that you say, everything that you do is based off of your experience and your perspective. You know and have seen things and have experienced things and have a background that nobody else has. So if you start with that and understand that anything you do, say, or think is based off your experience and perspective, that immediately brings you more self-belief and more confidence. Because at the end of the day, we could all say the same thing. We could turn into human chat GPTs if we wanted to, but everybody has that unique personal experience that adds value to every single conversation. So it doesn't matter how senior or junior you are, you have an opinion, you have a belief, and you have a perspective, and those things need to be shared. So moving on to what I call proper preparation. Now, a lot of us think that we do this extremely well, and we're right, because in this industry, again, with the perfectionism, we need to be prepared. We need to do our research. We need to study things as much as possible. But when we think about how that can actually bring more confidence, think about the last time you went into a meeting that you knew what was going on, but maybe you were a minute or two late. Maybe you weren't thinking about all the angles of the individuals that you were going to be talking with. When we think about how we can prepare more effectively, I will challenge you today, maybe not right now, because I don't want you to be distracted by your calendar, which can distract us all. But when we break this session today, I want you to go look at your calendar for the rest of this week and for all of next week. And I want you to think about the meetings that you have on your calendar, whether they're standing meetings or one-off meetings that are coming up. And I want you to look at all of those meetings. Two things I want you to do. One, I want you to take a 5-minute buffer before and after those meetings. So if you've got a gap in between those, put a 5-minute buffer or a 10-minute buffer for preparation time. That is something that we don't do at all because we get these back-to-back schedules, we get full calendars, and we're literally just rolling downhill all day long. I promise you, if you take 5 minutes of what I call the adult passing period, if you take 5 minutes of preparation, 10 minutes of preparation before a meeting to understand what you want to do, what you want to say, who's in that meeting and what they need to hear, you're going to go in with more confidence. Imagine going in and not knowing who's going to be in a meeting, but you're delivering content. That's a different level of confidence. But if you know who's in there, if you know what their goals are, if you understand what their motivations are, and you know how your information and the things you want to convey match with their needs, you are more confident the minute you walk into that meeting, whether it's virtual or in person. So taking that time to prepare and then study the roster of people in that meeting. And again, it could be a standing meeting, but look at that roster a little bit differently. How can you engage people that maybe you don't talk to that much? How can you learn more about them so that for future meetings, you can be more prepared to talk to their needs? Those are two ways that you could quickly become more prepared in any situation, in any meeting, to be more instantly confident because you are more aware of what's going on and you have that time to get yourself ready. Even that 5 minutes could be a mental shift. You may have everything locked in. You may know exactly the information. You may know exactly the roster and all the psychological impacts and who you're talking with. But sometimes we just need that psychological shift ourselves, because from one meeting to the next, you may have two totally different topics. And that 5 minutes will allow you to say, okay, that's done. Here's this next meeting. Here's my goal for the meeting. Here's what I want to say and what I want to do and what I want to accomplish. Don't forget to breathe and then move into that meeting. And you will feel much better from the word go. Now, once you're in that meeting, how are you conveying yourself? How are you preparing for the meeting? But what are you doing to deliver as confidently as possible when you're in there? Now, I will say of all the different organizations that I work with and attorneys that I coach and teams that I coach, it's amazing how just a little bit of self-doubt, that little drop of water in the mental well, can absolutely ruin the delivery that somebody has. So having, even if it's something that you're not incredibly confident when you're going into that meeting, understanding that there are ways that you can act in the meeting that bring more confidence as you're going along. So body language. Next time you're in a meeting, and pay attention to yours as well, but the next time you're in a meeting in person, look around the room. Just look at people's body language. Some people are hunched over. Some people are sitting back in their chairs. Some people are sitting up. Some people are slouching. Chances are the person's body language also matches up with their personal opinion of how much gravitas they have, and or there may be some dynamics in the room that you're not paying attention to during the conversation. So I've seen meetings before where a team leader will be delivering content and they say something, and then that person over to the right all of a sudden sits back or they fold their arms. That's a great time for you to pay attention, maybe take a note. Maybe it's not the time right there, but maybe you can ask a question afterwards. Tell me what happened there? Like what changed in your mind? That is a great way of having confidence in that meeting. Now, if you're the one presenting and somebody does that, pause real quick and say, hey, Rich, I see that something maybe struck you a little bit differently. Can you tell me what's going on? You can immediately engage that individual and ask them what's going on. Crystal, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a question, and I don't know
Yeah.
if you're getting to this,
Yeah.
you can tell me to wait.
Let's do this. I'm on the go and I'm flexible on this. What's your question?
So a lot of our meetings are not in person anymore, and they're virtual like this.
Mhm.
So if you had any tips for like how to be confident in a WebEx presentation or WebEx meeting.
Sure. Besides having a disco ball stormtrooper helmet and a bizarre painting behind me, what I will say is this, is that if you're looking into the camera, if you're addressing people, because a lot of times we get too distracted by what's going on. Number one, close every screen but the meeting screen unless you have to have something up. Like I've got my presentation up, but everything else is closed. I'm not distracted. I feel more confident. I feel more focused.
Yeah.
Sit up in your chair a little bit more. Because again, I have a very comfortable chair, and unfortunately, Pier 1 had it on a clearance sale. So if this thing ever breaks, I'm done for. But sometimes we get too comfortable. Sometimes we're too slouched because maybe we're working in a home office. Take a couple minutes right before the meeting starts. Straighten your back. Take a big deep breath. This sounds ridiculous. Smile at yourself in the selfie. The minute you do that, there you go. See, immediately your mood enhances and your stress lowers. So even doing that, and if I'm in my little pre-exercise and somebody jumps in the meeting, I'm in trouble. Especially if they take a screenshot, because I'm seriously like addressing myself. Okay, this is what we're gonna do. I smile at myself. I have that energy. I have my back up straight.
So
but
you
then
actually
also
like jump into your WebEx or your Zoom early and just
yeah. And depending on the platform too, you can get into the meeting. I think it's Teams that you get in, but it says, okay, join now. So you can see yourself view, you can set your camera up, you can make sure your microphone's working. Take those couple of seconds to do that ahead of time. Makes all the difference in the world. But then when it comes to interaction, pay attention, especially if you're presenting. And unfortunately, I don't see anybody else on camera right now, or I'd call them out on it if I needed to. But if I'm talking and I notice that you have a change in facial expression, because especially if we're in an in-person meeting, most of the reaction comes from the shoulders up anyway. It's going to be your facial expression. It's going to be your body leaning back. You're going to fold your arms. So you're seeing what you would see in a meeting anyway. So it's really important that you pay attention. If you see something very distinct, pause. There's nothing wrong with that, and say, oh, Crystal, I see, maybe you have a question. Was there something that you wanted to, like, I would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's non-confrontational, but it allows me to respond to what you're doing. And you may just say, my caffeine just wore off. Sorry. Okay, great. But also it's me engaging with you and me making sure that I'm paying attention to you and I see you. So
yeah. No, that's great advice. Thank you. And thanks
great
for
question too. Love it. Okay. Now I'm like super self-conscious looking at myself in the self view. So I'm going to do this real quick so I can check myself.
Yes.
But when we think about the body language piece of it, but also listening empathetically and active listening, How many times, and I work with attorneys on this all the time, how many times are we in Zoom meetings or we're in-person meetings and somebody's doing this? They're looking down at their phone, they're looking over at a screen over here. I literally have somebody I'm coaching right now on this topic that she had her glasses on and I could see she had 7 windows up. And I said, hey, by the way, you need to close those other 6 because there's only one that matters right now. So make sure you're not distracted. Make sure you're active listening. Make sure you're listening to feedback when people give you feedback in a very empathetic way. Everybody has a position. Everybody has a belief. You can listen to others. You don't necessarily always have to agree, but just listening makes all the difference in the world. And then decisiveness is critical. If you're going in to make a point or introduce change, be confident in what you're saying. And if you say, look, this is why we're doing it. This is the process that we got to by deciding to do this. This is what we went through. We've discovered that there were 2 options here. This is the best one. Here's what's going to happen after the fact. And just be very decisive and understand, because how many times we've been in meetings where somebody just rolls in and says, okay, we're going to be doing this now. All right, ready? Any questions? And people just roll out. If you're decisive and explanatory, people will be more on board. They may not jump on board right away, but they're going to be more on board and ask questions if you show that you've paid attention to how it's going to impact them, but be very decisive and very confident in the decision that you're making. I'm really just changing my hair and fixing my hair while I'm doing this. So
That's
it's a little
okay.
behind the scenes.
That's a good tip to steal also.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So if you want a virtual presentation webinar, we can do that too. I could show you all the behind the scenes of what I'm doing here. But again, with communication, it's really important between active listening and empathetic listening to be what I call a conversation chameleon. Now, everybody that we talk with in a certain day, they're going to have different roles. They're going to have different positions. They're going to have different needs. They're going to have different titles. They're going to have different days, frankly. And so all of these, I'm not going to go through all of them, but with this, it's really understanding who you're talking to. And so we always talk about the golden rule of treat people how you want to be treated. I like the platinum rule: treat people how they want to be treated. So if you're talking with somebody, I've gone through days where I've talked to a legal assistant, 3 attorneys, a graphic designer, a podcast host. So all of those people have different communication styles. All of your executives in your organization, if you're in-house, have different communication styles. Everybody that you talk to, if you're in-house at a law firm, all of your clients have different communication styles. Ask people what their preferences are. So if, I will say that I'm an old school phone caller. I will call you. And so some people that puts them off because that's not their communication style. So for my clients that I work with or my organizations that I work with, I understand what everybody's preference is. This person, Joe Smith, likes to be texted. He's not going to respond to a phone call. And he's definitely not going to call you back off a voicemail. Sally Jones is going to actually respond to an email quicker if you put this in the subject line. So understanding what those communication preferences are allow you to not only streamline your own workflow and streamline the things that you need to get done, but also think about this. If I were to come to any of you and say, you know what, I'm just going to pick a name off the list here. Hey, Brittany, I'd love to know how you prefer to be communicated with. What is your preference? Do I need to do long emails or short emails? Brittany, I can't see you on camera, but I'm assuming you're probably nodding and smiling a little bit because you feel heard and seen, because I'm asking for your preference. So that makes a big difference in team dynamics, up and down communications from executives to managers. It makes a humongous difference. Now,
And
with the chameleon,
asking like when you first meet someone?
Honestly, I do it when I first meet somebody, but I also do it sometimes when I feel like there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect. I've had team members that I've worked with when I was in-house at a law firm that maybe 2 years down the road, I said, hey, look, I want to make sure that I'm maximizing our communication. It wasn't like, hey, you suck at responding to emails, what's going on? It was, I want to make sure that our working relationship is as dynamic as possible. I want to make sure that I'm serving your needs as far as in taking communication. Tell me what I can do better. And that opens up a conversation. And 2, that helps build trust. Because if I'm just continuing to go down my road and I do not care what you think or what you need, that's going to start eroding trust over time, especially if there's a disconnected communication. So when you first meet somebody, but also there's never a bad time to just say, hey, let's take a pause. Let's figure out how we can optimize this.
Good advice. Thanks.
Great questions. If anybody else has questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A or the chat. These are great questions. Crystal's knocking it out of the park, but I know you all have great questions too.
Yeah, thanks for my personal coaching session.
But especially when we come to like the idea of communication, we talked earlier about preparation, this be prepared to pivot and understanding what everybody else is going through. That is a really good opportunity for you to be very agile in conversations. So if you go in and you're talking, and we talked about reading body language, oh, the chat is just for the three. Okay. So drop it in the Q&A. I keep mentioning chat and Q&A, so I appreciate the clarification on that. So drop your questions in the Q&A. But it allows us to say, okay, if I have a pivot moment, or if I see somebody's body language change, your ability to do that as opposed to just barreling forward allows you to have those moments where you can connect a little bit better with your audience and have better trust built in those communications. Now, this one, I tend to laugh at a little bit because it seems very simple. And what I'm going to share with you are some of the things that I've seen from a personal branding standpoint that we just need to be more mindful of. And so it's nothing, there's no rocket science really in any of this presentation, but especially this section alone, because when we think about our personal brand, it's a lot of different things. And, you know, when I say dress the part, I'm not trying to tell you what to wear. I'm not trying to tell you that your style and fashion is not up to par. What I'm saying is that if you want to have that executive presence, if you want to have that gravitas, know your audience. You know, I have walked in when I was in medical sales years ago. I used to go into doctor's offices in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. And if I went in a suit and tie, they didn't want to talk to me because they wanted somebody that they could relate to. They didn't want somebody that looked like a salesperson. They wanted somebody to come in and talk with them. Same thing when we have conversations here. So if we think about, if you're going to go talk to your CEO, you probably don't need to wear a t-shirt and jeans unless it's like a t-shirt jeans day. But understanding that your appearance is going to be very important as far as how much gravitas you have in a conversation or how you present to an organization. I did a keynote that I've done 50 times, but I did one specifically for, it was an agricultural and construction equipment company. Now, I normally dress button-up shirt, jacket. It was the first time and it felt really good that I got to wear a jacket with a Def Leppard t-shirt underneath it. But I had more relatability with the organization because of those kinds of things. Social media is one. I know in our industry, in the legal industry as a whole, people are timid about social media. Some are full in on it. Some are timid to post anything. I would say just be very mindful of what brand you want to say. Not to say that you have to fit a certain brand. You need to fit what brand you are. You need to convey the messages that you believe. You need to have a strong presence no matter what you believe in. And that is really important for you to understand that. Getting feedback on your brand, this is also something that's very nerve-wracking for anyone, but especially in our industry where resilience is low. We don't want to hear negative feedback, so we're afraid to ask for it. But if you went to somebody and said, hey, look, I call it the spinach in the teeth syndrome. If you went to a trusted advisor, which I believe big time in a personal board of directors, go to somebody that you trust and say, if you had to describe my brand to someone that didn't know me, how would you describe me? And ask for those different elements. How do I come off? How do I communicate? What is my online brand to you? That is a really valuable information because usually we're so deep in our own stuff that we don't pay attention, that we're not looking around. We're not really looking at it from an objective stance or an objective point of view. It's really important that you take the time to do that. And here's the trick. If I ask Crystal what my personal brand is, and if you want to answer now, feel free to do so. If you want to wait till later on because you don't want to embarrass me, that's fine too. But when Crystal gives me that feedback, the only thing I'm allowed to say is thank you. I appreciate you. I can't contest it. I can't argue it. Because as nerve-wracking as it is for me to ask for feedback, think about the position she's being put in. She's being put in a very vulnerable position that she may not deliver the best news or the news that I want to hear, but because she's somebody that I trust and that I believe in and that I have faith that she will tell me something, even if it's bad, because she has my best interest at heart, that's just as nerve-wracking for her, no matter how well we know each other. So if she gives me that, all I can say is, you know what, Crystal, I appreciate you. Thank you for telling me that. And then make the adjustments. Now, whether or not you cuss each other out under your breath after you leave the conversation, that's up to you. But it's important to understand that that person is investing as much effort and emotion into you as you are them.
Who do you think is like a good person to ask for feedback on your brand? Your coworkers or?
You know, I'll go back to this concept of the personal board of directors. To me, those are the people, and they should be of a variety of backgrounds, colleagues, friends, industry colleagues, you know, whomever you want to build that with. People that it all comes back to, who do you trust and who do you know has your best interest at heart, no matter how good or bad the feedback is. And so I think you build that group there, and then understand that each of them, and I will apologize for this reference, but it's kind of like Paw Patrol. Paw Patrol, each of the dogs has like a specific skill and characteristic and a capability that you're not going to call on one if you need something from the other. They have a specific way of helping you. So everybody in my personal board of directors has a specific knowledge base, has a specific angle there, and it's a variety of individuals, a variety of backgrounds, opinions, conversation delivery ability, everything. So build that first and then go to those people. And there will be somebody that's maybe a little bit more social media savvy and say, hey, look, can you quick go through my Instagram or my LinkedIn and tell me what you see? Also, there are tons of consultants. I do some personal branding consulting for some of my colleagues and some of my clients. So, you know, I'm more than happy to help out anybody that hears this, or if they want just a quick overview, I'm happy to give that too. So that personal board of directors and or a trusted advisor would be a great start.
Thanks.
All right. So commanding the room, a little bit different than that personal stance and that personal delivery that we had earlier. But when we think about how we actually convey the information, so yes, it's one thing to dress nice, you know, have the gravitas, have the right emotion when you walk in the room, standing up straight, delivering with confidence. But really, it all is all about what you're saying and how you say it. So I know we've been in meetings before where you had somebody that wasn't so sure about what they were saying, and what do? They hunch over, they talk quietly, they trail off, they say a lot of like, well, I'm not sure, but you know, they're very indecisive in their conversation. You have people that panic. You know, I've talked with people nonstop, and I talk fast by nature. So this is me actually consciously slowing down. But there are people that talk 100 miles an hour nonstop. If they were a car, they would be just blazing down the highway. So understanding that what you say is important. You need to make sure that you are speaking clearly, confidently, you have a good pace to you. If you're delivering good news, change the tone of what you're saying. If you're excited about something, show some emotion. You don't have to be like Ferris Bueller's teacher every time you get up in front of a group of people to talk. So don't be afraid of giving a little bit of emotion behind what you're saying. And that confidence in your delivery, again, going back to understanding that you need to be decisive with what you're saying, that will make you feel more calm. There's nothing worse than feeling not confident or rattled by a question. Here's my tip here, because this will inevitably happen to all of us. If it hasn't happened to you, that's fantastic. It will. We always are put in a position, or we will be put in a position at some point, we'll be asked a question that we don't know the answer. Maybe it's a little bit contentious. You know, somebody's coming at us with a little bit more aggression than we care for them to have. Or it's something that you need to think through. And again, rocket science tip here, breathe. That is the number one thing you need to do before you do anything else. Take a deep breath, you know, let me think about that. What you're doing is you're calming your nerves down. You're calming your mind down. You're lowering your heart rate and your blood pressure, but you're also buying yourself time to respond appropriately. Because a lot of times when we get put in that position, we tense up, we hold our breath, we're like, yes. And you're blurting an answer out. And it's one of those things that you wish you could take it back, or you think, you know, how many times we walked out of meetings like, I wish I would have said that. So understanding that taking a breath before you respond to anything is important. Understanding that you have the ability to do so is even more important, because some people, especially in our industry, we feel like we have to have the perfect answer within a second. Like we feel like there's a stopwatch on the question and we have to get it in as quickly as possible. Take your time. I'd much rather you take your time, think about it, take a big deep breath, and then say, you know, if you can give me a couple of minutes, I'd like to think on that. Because I want to make sure, and again, not that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I want to make sure that I give you the best answer possible. So if you can give me a couple of minutes just to noodle on that, think about it a little bit, let me get back to you. And so that brings more confidence in that communication and allows you to buy more time in your communication to make sure. The last one, And I will say, this is my favorite thing to talk about. One of my favorite things to talk about is that if you have never taken an improv class, go sign up for one this week. It is a game changer as far as your communication. It is a game changer as far as your confidence goes. I will say this, that first class is probably the most awkward you will ever feel since your first middle school dance. It is absolutely awkward as hell. Like, it just is. But I will tell you this, it winds up being the most powerful thing you can do. And I don't know if you want to hop in the Q&A just to kind of get some energy going here. Does anybody know what the first rule of improv is? And Crystal, if you know this, I'm not going to let you answer this one. If you know what the first rule of improv is, drop it in the Q&A just so we can see that you understand what it is. We have an answer. Oh, there it is. Oh, they tied too, both at 11:33 a.m. Matthew and Lindsay. Yes, and. Yes, and is the first rule of improv. And what that is based off of the fact is that improv is always about keeping the conversation going. Improv is about exploring opportunity, exploring some new idea, or exploring a new space. When we say no, when we shut it down, we're limiting the communication. We're limiting what those opportunities are. So we say, oh, and it doesn't always have to be yes and, but it could be, oh, instead of saying, no, I disagree, no, I don't want to hear anymore, say, you know what? Tell me more about that. Tell me how you came to that decision. Explain to me a little bit more of your thought process there. So that's the same as saying yes and. So if you're presenting and somebody's got a contentious question, you know what? Tell me more about that. I'm curious. And again, it's buying you time to think about how you want to handle the situation and what responses you want to give. But understanding where they're coming from, as opposed to just going head to head on a topic, makes you, one, a more likable leader, and two, it allows you to bridge conversation and trust where it may be eroding if you don't do that. So leveraging that mentality of ask questions, ask for more input, ask for more background, ask for more, how did you come to that decision? I would love to hear more about that. That engages that, and it makes you the more likable individual, especially in a contentious conversation. Now, these are all the different elements of executive presence, and I've given you some of the tips on how to implement it, but there are really a lot of different things that we can do to make sure that we are putting forth our best level of confidence, not only building our brand, but also how do we communicate and how do we connect with other people. So I will say this, and we are a research information-driven industry, but there are different things that you can do to flex your content a little bit or flex your information a little bit to not only know more about what you need to do to succeed in your professional world, but also build relationships and build a little bit more trust and build those bridges that maybe don't exist yet. But by being the proactive one, because we are more, even though we're more connected as a society, we're also more isolated. And there are studies galore about the isolationism in our industry, the isolationism overall, but how we are more lonely than ever. So I'm not going down the road of like putting together like a really sad mixtape here, but what I'm going to share with you are both some professional things that you can do, but also some professional and personal elements that you can do to enhance your personal brand and your executive presence in your organization. Now I'll bring this up a little bit more full size, but I'm going to flex some of these pieces too, is that when we talk about studying the client's website, signing up for LinkedIn alerts, staying up on industry news and asking about business goals, what this all is understanding who we're talking with and understanding more about them when we don't know as much as we should. I have a very good friend in the industry who is she's a sales coach. She's set up a very successful sales business. Her name is Samantha McKenna. If you're not following her on LinkedIn, please go follow her right away. She has this concept called Show Me, You Know Me. Now, this exists if you're in an in-house role, if you're in a law firm role, if you go do something completely different. We all like knowing that somebody knows something or is curious about us. We feel more seen and heard. And so what I always say is that if you do more digging and you do more research on an individual, whether it's an internal colleague, an executive at your organization, an individual, if you're in-house, if you're working with an outside counsel, get to know them a little bit better. Trust me, there's more information galore on us than there ever has been in the entire world. So if you take 5 minutes before, if you know you've got a meeting later on this afternoon with your CFO who you've never met before, go look them up on LinkedIn. Go learn more about them. Go find something that you have in common. Those different things are going to be game changers as far as our communication goes, as far as our executive presence goes. Because if you think about it, the more that you are liked by other people in your organization, the more that people feel like you genuinely care about them and others, your executive presence, your gravitas goes through the roof. Because so many times we just want to be heads down and do the thing that we need to do to get the thing done that we need to focus on. But if you do a little bit of research, if you think a little bit more about getting to know the individuals that you're talking with and that you're working with, that makes a big difference. I've had organizations that I've worked in or clients that I've worked in that I say, you know what, before we get going, I just saw the other day on LinkedIn that you were supporting this, one of these speakers that I'm friends with, or you posted this article on emotional intelligence. I love that topic. I would love to talk with you more about that some other time. The fact that I even pointed that out shows that I took time to get to know them, that I took time to research them and to build a better relationship with them. So follow people that you are connected with on LinkedIn, get to know them more, look at their profile a little bit deeper, but understand that we all want that deeper level of connection because, again, we are more isolated and lonely than ever, and that just that little bit of effort makes a big difference and goes a long, long way as far as establishing relationships in your organization and around the brand that you want to set up as an executive, especially as you're moving through your career. Now, one of our favorite topics about persuasion, because we all have goals. We all have things that we want to accomplish. We all have projects we want to get done and things that we want to get achieved. But not everybody agrees with us, unfortunately for them, because they all should agree with all of us, right? Because we all have the best ideas. But when we think about how we can be influential in our organization, it's understanding that I may think something and you may think something. And there's probably some commonality there. And when we're trying to convince somebody of something that we want to accomplish, if there's a change you want to make, if there's a new software you want to implement, if there's a new process you want to put forward, it's fine to think of it as you're building it or as you're building the business case as how it benefits you. But if you're trying to get somebody else to change with you, you can't go out and say, you know what, this is going to make my life easier. Think about that. If somebody came to you and said, we're changing our entire technical platform because it helps me, good luck with the change. That's not going to go over very well. But if that person comes to you and says, hey, look, we're going to be making some changes and here's the why, but here's how I feel like it's going to benefit you, or here's what I think, or, I would love to get your opinion before we make a final change just to see what's important to you. That's really important as you're trying to influence people. My grandfather, God rest his soul, was one of the best salespeople I've ever talked to in my entire life. And he said, instead of selling people on an idea, let them feel like it's their own. So if you're asking the right questions, if you're putting it in their tonality, if you're looking at it, how it benefits them, or asking the right questions, that is going to let them make the decision that they feel like they have more control over it. They feel like they have some say so when they really may not. They may just be confirming what you already knew. But if you feel like, or they feel like they have some sort of investment in the decision, they're also going to be more likely to stay the course when things change or when things go a little bit sideways. They're not going to jump ship. So I've talked with one of my clients earlier this week that she's rolling out a brand new software platform that changes her team's entire dynamic of how they work. And she was nervous about how it was going to hit. And I said, have you asked each and every one of them about their current workflow, what they like, what they don't like, and what they hope happens with this new one? And she said, no, I haven't. I said, do that today. Find out, take 5 minutes and say, I just want to get your opinion, want to get your thoughts. What are you excited about? What are you not excited about? This is really important to make sure that we put through the idea that we are listening and that we are hearing and that we are seeing those around us and that everybody has some sort of say-so in it. And again, even if it's a situation where you're the ultimate decision maker, just having the buy-in, as small as it may be from any individual, will change the dynamic of how you're viewed in the organization. So all that kind of conversation, question asking, and then if you've got someone that comes to you, and I'm looking at the give them a choose your own adventure option. I'll bring it up a little higher here. The choose your own adventure option. I'm old school enough to remember the choose your own adventure books in elementary school where You got to page 15 and it was, okay, if you want to go in the cave, go to page 20. If you want to go to the forest, go to page 38. And you got to choose what path you went. When you have a decision to make, or when you have somebody who is coming to you with, I'm going to bring myself back up, a great idea, you need to talk to them in a way that gives them a choice here. So I've had situations where when I was working in-house at a law firm, I had some of my attorneys would come to me with a great idea. And I would say, okay. And in my mind, I'm thinking, this is probably going to be one of the worst ideas, biggest waste of money that we've ever seen. But I would say, okay, we could do that. So there's option one. Do you mind if I presented just a couple of other options that I think would save us money and also make your life easier? Oh yeah, let's hear them. Okay, we could go with your idea. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this has got to be avoided at all costs. But if I could present to you option 2 and option 3, both of which save you time, make us money, make you look better, what do you think? And then they're choosing that path. Again, I'm not selling him. I'm letting him make that choice. It's his idea. He's choosing that path. And again, I don't have to say no. I'm actively using the improv philosophy. Yes, that's a great idea. And there's some other options that we want to take a look at. So there's a lot of opportunity to be flexible in that conversation. And then also when you make that decision, be honest. Just say, this is what I think. This is what it's going to do. Here's what the results are going to be based off of historical data and historical experience. And finally, two of my favorite conversation pieces in the entire world, emotional intelligence. This is, if you follow me on social media, which feel free, I'll share the link later on that you can follow me on LinkedIn. This is my favorite topic besides music. I love emotional intelligence. I think it is the most transformative, critical skill. It's not a soft skill. It is something that everybody needs, everybody can improve, and it has such a tremendous impact on your personal life and your professional life and your organizations. So as we think about emotional intelligence, what it is understanding your emotions and how you manage them, and then understanding the emotions of others and how you can navigate your relationship together. In our industry, and this is backed by data, and so this is not me just saying this based off of communication experience. Attorneys and those in the legal industry have the second lowest emotional intelligence of any industry in our country. Second only to doctors, which is terrifying. The people that have the most control over our lives and our well-being have the 2 lowest emotional intelligence. But it's because both professions, you have to be as perfect as possible. You don't want your surgeon to be like, there was a commercial about this where you're like, well, I hope for the best. Like, you don't want to hear that as you're about to go under. You want to make sure that those individuals have your best interest at heart and that they know exactly what they're doing. With our perfectionism in this industry, there is a lot of, and obviously with a lot of stress and anxiety and pressure that's on organizations and individuals and their teams, this is critical to success. I cannot stress this enough. That number one, we understand our emotions and we take control of our emotions as well. Because it is a highly emotional industry. You have highly charged conversations all the time. All the things I've been talking about to this point, the breathing, the improv mentality, the letting them buy instead of sell them an idea. All of those things come back to emotional intelligence. So the 2 things I will talk about here, and then also as we engage other people, because we don't live on an island in the middle of nowhere by ourselves, which sounds lovely on certain days. But as we're engaging other people, the active listening piece is critical. And then the idea of, what can I do for you? That's one of my favorite networking questions, or if I'm talking with somebody, and Amy knows this because I've said this to her numerous times when we talk, what do you need to have happen? What are you working on? Is there anything I can do to support you? Those, even if she doesn't have something, the fact that I'm even asking that, 1, is unfortunately rare, but 2, I genuinely mean that. Like, I genuinely want to support her and I support Crystal and support all of you because I genuinely care about helping people. That in of itself is a mentality change that will bring your executive presence forward, because the best leaders want to surround themselves and help other people along the way. Crystal, you got a question?
Yeah,
I'm practicing active listening by looking at you.
I appreciate that. Obviously this is a presentation on executive presence, and I think it's great that you're saying, how can I help you? But I think oftentimes people in that role are like the manager or the boss, and they might feel that that's not their job. The people who work for them are supposed to be helping them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So 2 things there. Great question. Number one, the unfortunate statistic is that as we raise our title and as we move up in an organization, our emotional intelligence drops. That's just data and research that proves that. So those individuals that are higher up in the company, higher up in title, their emotional intelligence by default will fall. Now it's up to them to actively work on that. But what I will say, and I'm failing on his name, so I apologize for that, but I read an interview the other day where this individual said, and he was leveraging emotional intelligence in an executive role, and he said, I ask more questions now as an executive than I tell people things. So when they're coming to me and sharing information, I'm asking questions. I'm not telling them what to do. I'm asking questions because I trust my organization. I trust my teams to get the right things done. Now, I'm not going to say that they just don't make any decisions and they don't tell anybody to do anything. But if they're doing those things, they're doing it in a, how am I helping our team? How am I helping our company? How am I helping other people? Because I can guarantee, and thank goodness we don't have a chat, because I'd ask people to say yes in the chat if they've dealt with this. We'll all come in contact in our professional career with somebody who is literally out for themselves and themselves only. And so those individuals do not have a strong executive presence. They're the people that people roll their eyes at and are going to just grin and bear it in a meeting with them. So you could be that. The support you will have around you, the network that you will have around you will erode over time because people don't want to be surrounded by that. But if you think about a positive leader or somebody, even if you think about going to somebody's house for a party on the personal side of things, if you walk into someone's house and they're like, oh my gosh, what can I get you? Please let me take your coat. These things, that's a servant mentality. So how are you helping? Even if you're giving direction, even if you're telling people or guiding people to do the right thing, how are you doing it in a way that you're either directly saying or giving the impression that I'm here to help and support you? Even by giving direction and saying, is there any confusion or are there any questions I can answer? I'm here to help. I want to see you all succeed. That's a simple servant mentality statement. That's all you need to do.
Good advice. Thank you.
But then also think about it on the low scale of things. The organization, and I won't mention anybody that owns a car company and a social media organization, but if you've got somebody who's maybe a little bit off the scale, off the hinges, maybe somebody that blows up, somebody that's notorious. I mean, there's stories galore of executives or leaders that just have hot tempers. They have a very low emotional intelligence. And at some point, people will deal with it. But also, what is their attrition rate of their company? What is the impact that they're having? Are they growing other people? Are they growing teams around them? Some of the best coaches and leaders in the entire world are ones that say, look, I've built a talented team around me that I trust. And if they leave my organization to go lead another one, I've done my job. That's a strong, positive leader. That's somebody that has strong executive presence. And I know we're getting a little close on time, so I want to move on to the last section, which is self-improvement. Now, I will say this. Self-improvement is all about the daily activities that you can do to improve yourself every single day. And I believe by the philosophy and the bottom line, this is get 1% better every day. And I don't care if that's, I deleted 100 emails that were just sitting in my inbox that didn't mean anything to me anymore. That doesn't matter if it's, you know what, I took a deep breath before 2 conversations. You just got better. And so that idea that we are always a work in progress, that we're always going to be ready for improvement, and that we can do things to improve ourselves every single day is critical. Going back to the idea of asking for feedback on your personal brand, do a self-assessment too. I know that there are things that I am not good at. There are things that I have as weaknesses or opportunities. I understand those. I call them weaknesses if I just don't have the bandwidth or the desire to improve it. Like, I don't ever want to ice skate. I just don't. And so that is always going to be a weakness of mine. If the entire earth froze over and we only got around by ice skates, I would be stuck at home for the rest of my life. So understanding that we have skills, we have opportunities, we have weaknesses is a critical piece to what you need to do to prioritize and to improve. I coach people on public speaking all the time, but people will come to me and say, I don't feel confident when I get up in front of a group, or I don't feel that, I feel like I tell good stories, but I don't feel like I organize my thoughts very well. Great. You've identified your skills. You've also identified your opportunities. But how many times do we either not pay attention to those things because we're either too busy, or it's painful and sometimes scary to sit down and say, what am I really good at? What am I not? And get out of that mentality that it's arrogant, because it's not. I'd much rather you say, I'm really good at these things. I'm so with these. I'm going to get better at these. And then these are just, the ship has sailed. I don't care to improve those skills. I probably will never make a pivot table in my life in Excel, and I'm okay with that. So understanding that you need to have the idea of improving, that you will always have something that you can get better at that helps you overall, that it enhances your presence and your abilities, and then make that plan. It's just like a New Year's resolution. We always make those, but what plan do we put behind them? That's why they all fail, and 80% of them fail in February, because we don't put a plan and minor goals on the way to a major goal as we're looking at self-improvement. So I encourage you today to sit down, or this weekend, sit down and write out a list of things that you're really good at, that are true skills of yours, and things that you see as opportunities. And then I want you to put one step next to those opportunities. You know what? I'm not really good at fill in the blank. I'm going to go read a couple of blogs, or go find a class, or pick up a book to improve these things. That is a really great step in the right direction. And then stay consistent. Block time on your calendar to make sure you're investing in that, because it's a true investment in yourself. We'll block time for some of the most ridiculous things in the entire world, but we are so hesitant to block time for ourselves because we put ourselves last a lot and way too much. So today is the day that you put yourself first in a very confident, very humble way, but understanding that nobody else is going to invest in you for you. You need to do that. You need to speak up. You need to find those opportunities. And if you can identify what those are, you're already on your way. Put a step to it and just start being consistent every single day by blocking that time to invest in that skill.
How much
And
time do you suggest blocking? Like an hour a day, or?
it really depends. It would depend on how strong of an improvement you need to make. It will depend on what, how important it is to you. I will say that I am working on some enhancement on some graphic design and video editing things. I'm blocking 30, 45 minutes once a week to just dedicate my time to focusing on those things. Now, because I know that I can't go just read an article and be better at it. I want to dedicate the time. There are certain skills that I need that are going to take some time to invest. Now, if it's, I need to go work on my active breathing during meetings, or I need to just practice the mentality of saying, because this will sound silly, but if you sit in your home office, like Crystal, after this presentation, I want you to sit there and think about the meetings that you go into that make you more tense. And I want you to think about it. I want you to close your eyes and visualize walking in that room, but I want you to do so and take a big, deep breath and just exhale to yourself, because that mental training, it's just like training yourself for a run or training any kind of new habit. When you now go into that meeting, you're going to be calmer psychologically because you've visualized walking in a more confident stance. That could just take 2 minutes a day. It's easy to do. So investing the time will vary on the time. It'll also vary on the frequency, but it just depends on what it is, how much you need to improve on it, and what the actual skill is.
Great. I know I've asked a lot of questions, so I apologize if I've eaten up everyone's time.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions.
Did you have anything you need to finish up, or should we open for questions?
Yeah, open it up for questions. I know we've got a few minutes left. So like I said, if
anyone's any questions, please put it in the chat. Another question that I had, just based on my personal experience, I guess, is like, also as you become higher up in an organization or more of an executive, I do think you're almost asked to collaborate more than being just an individual performer. So I don't know if you had any thoughts or advice on that.
Yeah. So a couple different things. One, I think anytime you're a collaborator, instead of just launching into a project or launching into something together, block 5 minutes, block 10 minutes, go grab coffee or something like that and talk about what you're about to collaborate on. And talk about concerns, goals, things you're excited about. But share those things on the front end, because I've been in those situations where I've been asked to collaborate with somebody. We're often going, yes, there's a kickoff meeting, but we've not had a real dedicated conversation around what we both hope to gain, or what fears we have or what concerns we have. And we get 2-3 weeks or a couple months down the road, and all of a sudden something bubbles up and we didn't deal with it before. So if you have that conversation on the front end, you know what to expect. You know that if this goes wrong, or we run into a technical difficulty with getting something done or getting something aligned with a software launch or some sort of digital transformation. Understanding that you had that conversation in the front end, like, oh yeah, this was the thing that we talked about. This is how we're going to handle it because we've already agreed on that, as opposed to just popping in and saying, oh God, now what? So trying to figure that out on the go is a lot harder than it is if you establish expectations on the front end.
And then we just had, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then I think that's good advice for me and others. And we had one question come in. What is the most common way you've seen people diminish their executive presence through unintended body language? Good
Yeah.
question, Lindsay.
So great question, Lindsay. Two major ways. I mean, there are numerous ways. Two major ways. One, the over-aggressor. So the individual that talks more aggressively, that raises their temperature, raises their voice. Unfortunately, I've had to work with people that are a bit abrasive with their language. Now that's on the extreme, but people that tend to be more combative in conversations. I go back to the idea of the improv or the choose your own adventure. If you're shutting conversations down because you just have to be right, that's going to diminish your executive presence, because the executive wants to be the conduit of everything that's positive and change. But if you're constantly battling, if you're constantly challenging, if you're constantly being condescending, unfortunately that happens. That to me is the quickest way. Anytime you get combative, your credibility is already on the way down. People that are too timid or don't believe in themselves enough. I have worked with people and have also worked directly with people and then also coach and consult some people that have brilliant things to say. But when they go to say what they believe in, it's, well, I don't know. And I'm literally like leaning into the conversation going, I almost can't hear you because your voice is dropping so much. And you don't have to go in and say, hey, I have this great idea on how we can improve our financial data flow. You don't have to be game show about it. But if you go in and say, look, I have these ideas and I would really love to convey them. Here's what I believe. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. So that timid behavior, closing your shoulders over, leaning into the conversation, leaning down into the table versus into the conversation, not asking questions. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people diminish their executive presence because they are afraid to ask questions because they don't want to look stupid. There's no such thing as a stupid question, which is why I want you all to put more questions in the Q&A. Like that is the quickest way to diminish it, by thinking that you know it all. Because if you don't ask questions in the moment and you're just off and going on something, or you've delivered some information and you didn't offer up the ability to ask questions, you're breaking the conversation, you're breaking the trust, you're breaking the knowledge. So it's important that you understand that you asking questions and that you making yourself available for questions will also strengthen your executive presence. But phenomenal question, Lindsay.
Yeah. And I just wanted to, I know we're ending, but I just wanted to, you had mentioned that personal board of directors before, and wanted to make a pitch for Legal Mentor Network as a way to find your personal board of directors. I've met some really amazing attorneys and people, including Amy and Rich, who I will put on my personal board of directors, including Lindsay and Brittany and some of the attendees here today. So thank you, Rich, so much for coming and joining us. And please check out legalmentornetwork.org if you have not already.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for having me today.
Yeah.
I want to personally thank you so much, Rich and Crystal. There were not a lot of questions, partially because you were knocking it out of the park with the highlights that we were thinking. So thank you both, and thank everyone who joined us today. We did record. It will be on our YouTube channel. I know I am going to go back. I was taking notes furiously, but Rich, the content was so great. It's definitely one to watch more than once. So thank you again. We're going to be taking a break for the summer with our webinars, but we will be back on September 26th with what hiring managers look for. So make a note and we'll start promoting that probably in August. And thank you all again and have a great summer. Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.